what should a doctor like be mindful of? I mean, look, end of the day, a DSO wants to do a deal in the dark. They don't want to have anybody at the table. They want to control the narrative around the doctor's EBITDA and apply a multiple to that EBITDA and make the doctor feel good about that. They want to control everything about how the deal is structured to protect themselves and not the doctors. So I think for one, just like getting representation in the first place, getting a practice valuation, understanding what your business is worth before you go to market is critically important. I think secondly, look, not all DSOs are built the same. I mean, there are some DSOs, and we've spoken about a couple that are like so infrastructure light. Then when we go to vet them, we'll go to an office. And if there are people in the office, the corporate HQ of the DSO.
Hello and welcome to another episode of The Champion Dentist. I'm Mike Kulwiec, and everybody's heard about this concept, the DSO, and organizations like Heartland and Aspen and Pacific Dental and Clear Choice. Well, we're here today to talk about that and how all of that relates to your dental practice. I am delighted to have with me Mr. Justin Klingshirn, who is a partner with McLerran Associates. And these guys are the leading experts when it comes to what's going on in the DSO space as well as the private buyer space. Justin, welcome. It's so great to have you with us today.
Mike, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, Justin, you have been in this field for, I believe, over 15 years, and you have been involved in over 500 dental practice acquisitions. Does that sound right to you?
That's right. Yeah. So I started as a banker for one of the largest lenders in the country, stayed there for about a decade. And right as COVID hit, I leapt over into the DSO and private equity space. So now overseeing the M&A division for McLerran Associates.
Well, this has got to be a lot more interesting than banking.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, the stories are definitely a little more, they get creative. There's certainly more science projects.
Well, it's certainly a big change for in the world of dentistry. I've been in it for almost 50 years. And when you talk about revolutions in dentistry, well, one of the big ones was in the 70s when dentists could officially advertise. That was a big deal. You know,
Right,
the Yellow Pages was a big deal. So,
right.
so much has changed technologically, but it's also there's been a big change now in the form of ownership. And I know dentists out there, they really want to know, hey, what's going on? What is the degree of ownership? Where is it going? And we're going to talk about all of that in our time together today. So, along those lines, then, let's take a look at just where are things right now in the overall dental practice sale marketplace and the world of private equity and these large chains and also what's going on in the world of private buyers as well.
Yeah. So broadly, DSOs have consolidated approximately 15 to 20% of the market. It varies by specialty. But every day there are new practices that are coming online via startup dentists, right? Typically they're about, I think the stats are about 800 to 1500 at least per year that are started up in the United States. And that doesn't include those that are building second offices that currently have one. Um, that said, both markets are healthy. The DSO market has been a little turbulent, but otherwise valuation have remained near all-time highs. And the private buyer market has been picking up a lot of steam lately because all of the baby boomers that they're really entering that retirement age. So we're seeing a cascade of sales on that side of the business.
So when we look at the DSO market, I understand from what I've read that with the change in interest rates, there's been some headwinds for DSOs and some challenges and I think one of the things that your firm does is you help guide a doctor who's interested in a sale in understanding, who are the, if you will, the class A entities to have a conversation with. Can you tell us more about just what are the challenges that are facing DSOs today relative to when interest rates were zero?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I think to speak to like the doctor that's speaking with us today, they're wearing three hats. For one, they're a seller, right? We're here to maximize their cash at close, their equity, and help them understand risks, right? Whether or not the earnout has downside protection, so on and so forth. They're also going to be a partner with this DSO. So they have to understand what the DSO is going to do for him or her, and vice versa, what's expected of them. And thirdly, by way of holding stock in the DSO, which is likely going to be the case, they're an investor. So, how did they underwrite that investment? And they oftentimes lean on us to help unpack some of that. Now, that said, you talked about, the interest rate environment and DSOs. And yeah, I mean, look, in the private equity world, the way private equity works is they raise a fund and they borrow dollars against that fund. So if interest rates go up, their interest expense goes up, which means their returns are a little more muted. So because of the reliance on borrowing money at a today higher interest rate, their returns are a little more muted. And there's almost been a standoff between some of the operators of the DSOs wanting to recap and the financial sponsors saying, you know what, I'm here for a 4X and there's only a 2.5X on the table right now. So I'm not ready to pull that trigger.
So there has been a bit of a pullback in activity. How does that translate to what's going on?
So it translates from a recap perspective in that every DSO, it's their goal to recapitalize. They want those dollars to change hands from the current, perhaps, family office that's raised capital to fund and grow that DSO. They want to sell that asset to another larger entity, usually like a private equity firm, right? Now, given the interest rates have gone up in recent years, right? I mean, they've more or less tripled. Uh, that impacts the protection, the returns on the holding company stock of the family office that issued that stock to other dentists and back to its investors.
So what you're looking at if you're a dentist in this whole world of DSOs when there's PE involved is these are not long-term investors that are providing the money. They're there for a limited period of time.
Yeah.
They're engaged in financial arbitrage, buy at a certain price, sell at a higher price, and that's how they make their big money. And so
Yeah.
we understand
Yeah.
that. But if you're a dentist and you're looking at that world, what should you be concerned about? Are there any major risks involved when a doctor's thinking about selling to a DSO? What really, I know you're there for the due diligence, but for the sake of our time together today, what are the red lights and the flashing yellow lights that you typically help the doctor avoid when it comes to selling to a large entity like that?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So I think it's important to understand that, and to tie off the interest rate stuff, look, that affects recapability, right? That affects the DSO's potential to liquidate that stock into dollars for the doctor. Now, tying that off, what should a doctor be mindful of? I mean, look, end of the day, a DSO wants to do a deal in the dark. They don't want to have anybody at the table. They want to control the narrative around the doctor's EBITDA and apply a multiple to that EBITDA and make the doctor feel good about that. They want to control everything about how the deal is structured to protect themselves and not the doctors. So I think for one, just like getting representation in the first place, getting a practice valuation, understanding what your business is worth before you go to market is critically important. I think secondly, look, not all DSOs are built the same. I mean, there are some DSOs, and we've spoken about a couple that are like so infrastructure light. Then when we go to vet them, we'll go to an office. And if there are people in the office, the corporate HQ of the DSO, I mean, I went to one and I remember I met the marketing guy, the head of marketing, the CMO. And I said, okay, do you know where the head of recruiting is? And he went, oh, yeah, that's me too. And I was like, what? Hold on. You all
Okay,
have
so
60
wait,
locations.
I'm going to stop you right there. What you're saying is,
Yeah.
Mike, when it comes to the DSO market, first of all, how many entities are there?
Total about 2,000, but that does not mean that there are that many buyers. Probably about 500 buyers in the United
Okay, so
States.
I mean that's a lot more than maybe what most dentists are aware of. It's a bunch. Okay,
Sure.
and what you're saying is it's soup to nuts. That there
Yeah.
there are Class A firms and there are non-Class A firms, and if you're a private practice owner, this is your life's work. Boy, it really pays to do your homework and get advice from people like your group, McLerran. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Look, the worst mistake you can make is selling your practice to a DSO that is not a good fit for you, right? Or that is insolvent, or that is, a zombie company, or that is just on its last legs. Or that if you're a doctor and you want support, they're infrastructure light. Or there might be a DSO that you sell to that, I mean, quite frankly, you don't want them to do anything with your business other than give you the capital to perhaps grow. You might want to realize some economies of scale, like, they might have cheaper supply costs, and you might want to tap into that. But quite frankly, with that doctor selling to an infrastructure heavy DSO that's going to operate with a heavy hand might be their biggest mistake. So I think for one, it's understanding who you are, what you're looking for, what is your why, and then finding the DSO that really scratches that itch.
Well, what you're talking about is in one way it sounds like a marriage, and in the other way
Hmm.
it's a financial partnership, right? And you've got to get that right fit. I think that's a really important point. I know in my experience in working with our clients at Trivantage that it's been a mix. It's been wow, great partnership, great relationship. To there's definitely some challenges, and if you are and you're typically as a seller, you're going to be required to be there for a period of time. And
Hmm.
certainly if you're younger in your career, you may want to be there for a significant period of time. So this is a
Sure.
very important selection process that the
Yeah.
dentist needs to go through. And like the number one point that I'm underlining with you is don't do it alone, right?
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
don't do it on the cheap, and do what you need to do, because whether you are in your 30s or 40s or 50s or 60s, this is a major investment for you. This is your practice. And done right, it's going to command a good value. So let's talk about value. What are the factors that a dentist, whether they're in their 40s, 50s, or 60s, what should they be thinking about? What should they prioritize to set themselves up for the highest value possible?
Yeah. Great question. Um, First and foremost, there are some things that you simply can't control, right? Your specialty, your payer mix, your location, the geography matters. You want to be within 60 miles of a major metro. Ideally, of course, there are some great rural assets that we've sold. Also, number of operatories. Ideally, that is at least five or more.
Mhm.
Um, I'd say doctors and doctor count, having two plus doctors is ideal. I wouldn't focus on locations as much as I would focus. I mean, look, the main driver of value is going to be your EBITDA. So the profit after you've paid up for all the expenses, the leftover money for the investor, when you've paid for every bit of all the expenses, including your own salary on a go forward basis, which would be tied to production. Now, I mean, beyond that, I would say revenue projection trends, just profit margins. I wouldn't want to over optimize the practice in that you have 40% profit margins or EBITDA margins. Um, you want to leave some sort of meat on the bone for the DSO to be able to improve your practice post affiliation. I also think age has become a really big factor where doctors today in their 40s will command higher multiples than those in their even 50s or 60s, right? The longer your runway, the higher the multiple. Also, let's just say the shorter the story, the higher the multiple. And what I mean by that is the more specialized you make your practice, right? Maybe it's that you can only do this one thing. Or maybe it's that you've had so much staff turnover, you have to explain it all away, right? The longer those stories, the more question marks the DSO has, about your practice, and they might not be as willing to lean into that practice. So, look, picture yourself as an investor, as them. What would they want to buy? They want to buy a practice with an owner that has, by the way, for one, a great personality, healthy margins, great trends, expandability, maybe multiple doctors in a geography that they can recruit to, both from a staff and from an associate doctor standpoint. And ultimately, like I go back to it, the doctor's personality does matter a lot. So we'll coach our clients through our calls, through the meetings, to say what should be said to intrigue the DSOs.
Understood. And of course, no matter what is communicated vis-a-vis the personality of the doctor, ultimately due diligence is going to occur,
Hmm.
and the curtains are going to get rolled back, and the numbers are going to be looked at very carefully.
Yep.
So as we both know, having a strong, stable practice with a great leadership team is really important. So one of the things that we do at my company is we help that doctor develop a really strong leadership team. That puts the practice in a position where the income goes up for the doctor, peace of mind goes up for everybody, and puts the practice in, from our perspective and from the perspective of a buyer, in the position of being extremely strong and stable. And you were
Hmm.
alluding to turnover and other issues. So stability is really important, not only with the doctor and his or her life and how they present themselves, but the stability of the practice that will make a big difference. And if a doctor can present, if you will, the story of a strong, stable team
Yeah.
and the culture that's there and the vibe that's along with that and the flow of new patients and the numbers behind that, what you then create is a very investable
Yeah.
business.
Stability is huge. Yeah. I mean, today we're talking about durability of revenues in like the AI space, and you're trying to forecast out, you know, Salesforce to see if those revenues are durable over the course of 10 or 15 years. And there are question marks. In dentistry, it's the same way. I mean, look, if you've had not only stable revenues, but if you the tenure of your staff is relatively mature, right? If you've had an associate doc for a while now versus a whole bunch of turnover, if you do have a leadership team in place that can kind of allow for you to operate a little more hands off, right? That becomes a business that is not so reliant on you as the
Right,
doctor. And
right.
remember, they're buying a business, right? Don't see it as, yeah, yeah, well, they're buying me. The more that you think that they're buying you, the worse the outcome's going to be. They're buying the business and you're in that business. It's the best way to frame it.
Yeah, and I think that's extremely well said. Um, and I that concept, if you're a dentist listening to this, let that sink in. Because whether you're looking to sell in a year or 5 years or 10 years, the stronger you create the leadership team of your practice, the stronger you make it where it's not dependent on you with the things that you've described, Justin. It puts you in a position where your income's going to be higher, your quality of life is going to be higher, your stress is going to be lower. Everybody's going to going to enjoy being at work on Monday morning a lot more if you're doing the right things. And I know that's one of the things that I'm proud of is that we do a great job of helping the doctor put those pieces together. And we just don't jump in with a rah-rah speech. It is an operating system that we install in the practice that creates long-term success. So if you are a doctor in your 40s and looking at the opportunity to sell. And number one, my question is, if you are a doctor in your 40s and you're more entrepreneurial, or maybe you just don't want the worry, what's different about how you think about the practice and the potential sale to a DSO as opposed to a doctor who's in his mid to late 50s?
Yeah. Yeah. You're much more of a partner in your 40s than you will be in your 60s. In your 60s, it'd be purely for exit planning purposes, right? I mean, the math is the following that if you can fetch a 7 to 8x on your profits and liquidate that under long-term capital gains rates in exchange for, um, working for 5 years, then that's a win. Just economically, that's a win. Uh, that's exit planning. That's for the doctor in their 60s. In the event you're in your 40s, right, and you want to work for the next 15 years, you have to really have a more kind of compelling why to partner up with the DSO. Now, some of those could be, look, I'm trying to buy back some time. I've got young kids. I'm trying to spend time with them. Time is the most valuable commodity, and I'm buying some of that back. Or you might be de-risking. We work with some doctors in their 40s, and they have, I mean, 8+ figure top line businesses, right? And if you have a $14 million practice and your home is worth $500,000, I mean, the balance in allocation has gotten so wonky that de-risking simply makes sense from that standpoint. Or you could just use the support as a means to grow more. So a lot of our younger doctors partner with DSOs and they have their facilities team handle an expansion or a second location. I mean, there are actual teams in many of the DSOs that help with exactly that, to where the doctor is available for design feedback, right? But as far as coordinating the build out, it's more hands off than it otherwise would be for sure if you were to do it yourself. So,
So, and you raise a really great point. I want to underline that there are DSOs where they can do what you just described. There are others where the infrastructure is not there and they're not going to be able to make that concept of additional locations come true, correct?
correct,
So
correct.
that's again another reason to pick your
Yeah,
partner carefully.
it's as I said, I think at the beginning where I had walked into a DSO's headquarters and I met the marketing guy, but he was also the HR guy, and I think he handled something else like procurement. I mean, look, vetting these DSOs and understanding the people behind the management team, the leadership bench, how deep all those things are, like that's critically important. I mean, how do they have internal teams for RCM, right? Do they have schedulers? Do they have actual recruiters? Do they have a regional manager with boots on the ground? So,
Yeah, yeah,
and understanding that, like, that's where, we say if you've met one DSO, you've met one DSO. They are so incredibly different. And quite frankly, some are right for some people, others not so much. Um, but they vary tremendously in that way.
So a doctor who is looking there, it's in their 40s or even their 50s, there's runway left there. Let's look at just one fundamental assumption that might be in the minds of a doctor.
Okay.
And that is, well, I think maybe I need to have multiple locations. I've heard my buddies like multiple locations. And,
Sure.
let's just look at that concept of, okay, because the reality of it. If that doctor has got a strong, stable practice and they've got a good leadership team, is that a logical thing for them to pursue? Number one. And let's look at a different example. You've got the doctor where they don't really have that yet. And now in their mind, they're thinking, hey, I'm going to start a new office. Yep. So in other words, they've got a leaky bucket in their practice. And now they're thinking about starting another office because they're operating under this assumption that that's how they're going to get a better multiple. Let's go into that, please.
So, really good question. For one, you are simply not going to get a better multiple only because you have a second location or a third location for that matter. That's just not how it works. That creates more overhead, more management burden on the behalf of the DSO, and more, quite frankly, like just infrastructure costs to support all of these things beyond the management. Look, if you have there are four more doctors that expand to three locations that I believe regret it than that don't. Normally, you can handle two. Great. When you get to three, the headaches really start. You have to bring in infrastructure to help you support that platform. And that comes at a cost, right? Whether it's a regional or ops manager yourself, managing three locations becomes difficult. My advice would be you do not expand into a second or a third location until you are almost fully out of the chair, meaning you're working maybe one day a week in whatever practice that is. Because backfilling your work, replacing you, could be far harder than you think, right? You're in a practice, it's collecting $2.5 million. Dollars. You're producing about a million, million and a half in it. You might have another doctor working part time. As you leave, that founder has left the building. And as you take your focus off one practice and realignment to another, you might see the other practice start to fall in revenue, right? Your first practice, that is. So, look, I think it is appropriate if you're tapped out from a location standpoint, you have no room to expand. You have moved to the point where you're out of the chair, at least 2 days a week, call it. And you have the runway, go for it, but also be mindful that if you're looking to sell your platform in the next like 2 to 3 years, well, that second location isn't going to generate substantial EBITDA yet for another 2 or 3 years. So it might elongate the time that it takes you to get to market. And just lastly, what I'll say is that we do see this happen a lot where doctors that are expanding, they'll buy or start a third practice and they'll come to us and they'll say, you know what, I'm ready. I am so sick of it. They had a major life event or just, Becky finally drove them off a cliff. and they're ready to sell. That third practice, or that newest practice might actually drag down their EBITDA, their collective EBITDA, and it might actually be a burden insofar their practice is worth more without it. So we have had to before plenty of times basically sell two or three practices to a DSO and strip out one and sell that one to a private buyer for perhaps the dollar cost that took to actually build that up, if that makes sense.
Well, what you're really talking about is there's a big difference between you being McDonald's or Chipotle and
Hmm.
opening new locations and scaling an organization where the franchise brand is there, the infrastructure is there, all of the systems are there, versus what you're trying to do as an independent entrepreneurial dentist. And really what I've encountered is that if the doctor wants to become a CEO dentist, there is a path that they need to follow to get there. And it does require exactly what you've described. And one of the smartest things they can do is get appropriate coaching, whether that's from me or other people out there. Don't try and do it on your own because it is complex. When you go beyond your current four walls into another set of walls,
Yeah.
complexity increases significantly,
Yep.
geometrically, and it's very important that you have a plan and a path on how you do that. The whole foundation of that is just how strong is your leadership, your mindset,
Yeah.
and your team, and your systems and operations. And the way I look at it, Justin, what we install in a business is this understanding of it starts with your values and your vision. Where are you? Where do you want to go? How is that reflected in your conduct and that of your team? And we want to make sure we've got the right people in the right seats. We have a whole methodology for doing that. And boy, talk about a constraint for a dental practice. One wrong person in a seat can drive the whole organization down to a level of average to mediocre. And that's not
Yeah.
good. So, right people,
Yeah.
right seats. And the other is numbers. You
Yeah.
know, a lot of dentists are not oriented toward wanting to embrace numbers. And I understand that. They had enough math, if you will, between college and dental school when it comes to biology, chemistry, and all of that. But the point is that we have to love our numbers. If you love your numbers, they're going to love you back. Because
Hmm.
if they're not loving you back, it's like, hey, I'm giving to the relationship. What's going on here? Let's work on
Sure.
this.
Sure.
And so those two factors alone, three
Yeah.
factors, the vision, the leadership, the values, combined with the right people in the right seats and knowing your numbers. Just that alone, there's more to it. Makes such a huge difference
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
in the success of that practice. So the stronger you are as a dentist and wanting to become a CEO dentist, the stronger you are in those factors, vision, people, numbers, the more capable you are to grow beyond those four walls. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. 100%. I think the regrettability drops dramatically if you're able to do the things you had just mentioned, right? You create a scalable business with a leadership team and coaching to help you through that process because there are going to be hurdles that you haven't yet crossed in the second and third locations that weren't simply there in the first.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. So let's talk about the differences between selling to a large entity,
mhm.
and as you know, there's hundreds of them out there now, large entities, good, bad, and
Yeah.
indifferent, versus selling to a private buyer, another dentist. What are the differences there?
Yeah. Yeah. And I should start by saying that we'll actually this year do more units on the private practice side of our business than in the DSO side of our business. And historically, look, we've been around for 35 years and we've lived in the private practice world, right, for that long. And still continue to today. Today, we represent just premium practice owners, usually a million on up, nationwide, both in the private sales and the DSO spaces. Now, that said, um, very different, obviously, whereas a DSO deal requires more or less a work back of 3 to 5 years at least. A private sale is often just a walk away. It's a doctor that's ready to either move, they're aged out. They're selling, right, as they normally would. And oftentimes the value is not necessarily predicated on profitability as it is in the DSO space. It's predicated on just gross revenues. And the profitability moves that needle up or down, right, to where 100% of last year's collections is right at about the ceiling. Typically, banks actually cut off lending at that mark. And how profitable or how many ops or how, all of the factors I had talked about before that DSOs value, the private parties value as well. So if you're a doctor, I mean, look, if it's all bread and butter and they can come in with a robust skill set and immediately increase revenues by 50% on the same patient base, fantastic. They can expand from like 6 ops to 8, fantastic. If it's in a geography where they know that like it's growing, they have a neighborhood that's being placed just a mile away, right? With 3,000 homes, that's fantastic. So all these factors impact value. That said, the same goes to where even if it's not us, use somebody to help you through the process. It is highly emotional, right? I mean, not only that, but buyers misbehave. Every single buyer today, for the most part, is repped up with either like, a buyer's rep, so to speak, or a consultant that's really helping them unpack and negotiate the transaction. And you want to have somebody in your corner in that way too.
Yeah. So in that situation, the doctor, for whatever reason, mm, did the homework with you relating to DSOs, and the fit just didn't look like it was going to be right at all with anybody.
Hmm.
And they're open to that selling to another dentist concept.
Hmm.
What is different about the mindset, if anything, for you as a dentist? This is your practice. Now you're uh, open to selling it to another dentist. Is there anything different that you need to have in your mindset that's going to be supportive of a successful sale?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be really emotionally ready for it. It's interesting because on the DSO side, your life, it changes in that it gets easier. There are some pressures that are lifted from you, but largely you're still like the clinical lead in the practice. I mean, you're the cultural lead in the practice, right? You're the doctor partner. Things aren't going to change dramatically for your staff. I mean, when you retire from practice, that new doctor, even if they say, yeah, yeah, maybe I'll keep you on for, indefinitely, a couple days a week. Well, they have all sorts of bills that you don't have. They have student loan debt. They probably have the car debt, a new home debt at a high interest rate, and they need to pay for all of those things. And how do they pay for it? With the production that sits in your practice. So, quite frankly, you have to really be ready to not necessarily retire from something, but retire to something. So, I mean, ask yourself, what is it that you could do? And you might fill your schedule, before even I finish that sentence and say, oh my gosh, I dirt bike, I spend time with my grandkids, what have you. I travel finally. Perfect. Then you're ready, man. Go for it. Go do it. But if you're not ready to hand over that handpiece, um, I think emotionally it can be a little more abrupt than in the case of a DSO transaction.
Yeah, it's well said. Let's, you talked about emotion, and certainly a dentist who, he or she who's been successful, they've had their practice for decades. There's an emotional tie to the team. And one of the things that you have witnessed is, I'm sure you've seen great transitions from one dentist to another, but you've also seen not so great transitions from one dentist to another. So if you, as a dentist, you have found an individual who you really like, you think they're going to be a great fit for your patients and your team, walk us through what are the things that you, out of the kindness and love that you have for your team and for your patients, what should your willingness be from, again, this personal values perspective, that you should want to contribute as part of the preparedness and that transition, so that you, 6 months, a year, 5 years down the road, go, you know what? I handled that really well. I really
Yeah.
set everybody up for a great transition. Can you speak to that, please?
Yeah, and just to make sure we're on the same page, are you speaking just solely on the private, the doctor to
Yeah, on
doctor
the private
transition
side.
side of the equation? Yeah.
Yeah, again,
So
because it's a very different animal when you're selling to that other doctor and now you're exiting.
for sure. And it's more abrupt. And look, I wish I could tell you that there are all sorts of things that you could do beforehand, but quite frankly, there aren't. I mean, look, they're buying goodwill, the new buyer. So, I mean, part of our job in that side of the business is to vet them, vet their personality, vet vet their financials. You learn a lot about somebody by looking at how qualified they are or aren't. Um, quite frankly, you will lose control, right? Almost all of the time. I mean, the staff's going to love them. They're going to be happy for you, right? But of course, you, I think, are naturally going to be worried that your front desk, who's been with you for 35 years, is going to leave. And quite frankly, they're probably prepared for that too. They want to retain everybody. They're buying goodwill. Goodwill is only as good as the people behind it. So there's not a lot that you're going to be able to do as an owner leading up to it. Um, I mean, look, if you feel the need to, you know, set in a retention bonus for the new owner, great, but that's probably not even necessary, right?
Yeah.
For staff to retain on.
Well,
But
if as I think about it, Justin, and
mhm,
that's you've underlined a really important point. There is only so much the seller can do. But on the other side, I have clients where they are the buyer, and that's a whole different animal, isn't it? And what is the extent of your involvement with buyers? I mean, do you represent buyers or only sellers?
we purely represent sellers. Yeah, we're exclusive on that side.
Well, let me just comment on that. If you and certainly love your observations. If you're the buyer, that transition has to be handled extremely well. And you are not buying a tractor trailer. Okay. You're not buying a piece of equipment that now you're going to become a trucker. No, you're buying a dental practice. And then you've just said it is goodwill. There may be physical assets associated with it. So that again, all the more reason why you should be getting outside advice from qualified people on how am I going to approach this transition? How should I approach
Hmm.
this transition? What should my communication be with the new team? How do we choreograph not only
Hmm.
the team and how we want that to go the first 90 days to a year, but also let's work this through regarding how we want the whole rollout to be with the patients of record. This is to me, and because I've seen this, both the good and the bad of it, is with the right guidance, my organization, can do a great job in helping that buyer avoid fallout, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
fallout from staff, fallout from patients. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that the coaching on both sides of that is absolutely necessary because when you're buying goodwill, handling that is like you want to be the most sensitive person. I mean, white glove it at every opportunity. Um, that said, I mean the buyers are like usually you'll find they're not going to do much in the first like 6 months. We coach our buyers in that way, right? It's same ops as usual. Follow the seller for 6 weeks. That's the absolute minimum that I'd suggest. I mean, of course, you can take over from day one and be out of there. But watch, learn, and then emulate. Because with our listings, at least they're buying premium practices, right? They're buying million on up. They're not buying fixer uppers. It's one thing if they have a practice that's collecting $300,000 and that buyer is coming in and they're looking to basically, I mean, quite frankly, just utilize the location in that it has a great facility, perhaps. So, having a plan, having coaching around all of that is really necessary. I would argue now more than ever. And I would also argue, especially as it relates to like owners have different ways of conducting businesses, right? They might be different demographically, they might be different um, in their ability to handle like conflict or how they treat people. And then the last thing I'd say is just be mindful of, announcing to the staff and how that gets announced. Um, while it might be difficult to withhold something from your like, again, that office manager that's been with you forever, take the guidance of, the advisor that you're working with as it relates to, advising everybody that there is a transition
Yeah,
happening.
absolutely. And that calls for forethought and discernment and careful planning, right? And that entire process. Well said, Justin. We have covered as I say, the entire waterfront here, right? From the
Hmm.
world of the corporate entities to that individual who's buying your dental practice. Your insights have been absolutely fantastic. If a dentist is thinking about that sale, whether it's in the near future or the not too distant future, talking to you and your organization, in my opinion, makes absolute sense. So, what I want our viewers to know and listeners to know is in the episode notes is the contact information for Justin. Okay. Reach out to Justin and his associates at McLerran. You're going to have a no obligation conversation and you're going to get to know each other. And I know for a fact you're going to be in good hands. Justin, thank you so much for your time today. It's been so informative, so productive, and just a pleasure to be with you. Thanks again.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Mike. Thank you.
Until next time, thanks very much for joining us. Be well. Cheers.